when you have women in leadership positions, when you have multi-culture sitting at your table making decisions for an industry, that industry does better. Those companies tend to do better.
Yes, men are still making more money, so women still have to leave. How does that change if women continue to leave the workforce because men still continue to make more money?
The entry level, if the workforce is made up mostly of women, but then all of the managerial leadership positions are men, there's clearly going to be a bit of a disconnect.
One thing that I speak about a lot is we need men as our allies. We need to involve men, we need to ask men to help us because the majority of decisions are still made by men. I go to conferences, women conferences, and there's hardly any men in the audience, but you need them there to hear the conversations or they don't understand it.
Hi everyone, welcome back to The Laura Show. Today's topic is one that I think will resonate with a lot of my listeners, my viewers. We are talking about gender inequality in the workplace. And I know a lot of us have personal experiences or for sure have friends or family who have dealt with a lot of these issues: glass ceilings, sexual harassment, pay inequality, not getting a promotion when you feel you deserve it, all of these things that we are so accustomed to. And yes, although I think the world's getting better, but we still have some work to do. And there are a couple industries that are falling well behind the rest of the world, hospitality being one of them. And so I brought on my friend here, Val Upfold. She is an executive recruiter, and she's going to talk to us about some of these issues. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I want to get right into it, because
Yeah.
you were telling me some great things on our pre-chat, some statistics around women in the workplace, women in leadership, in the hospitality industry in general. Can you share some of that?
Yeah, and I think it's general around all industries, but hospitality is one of the worst, I guess. So starting out in hospitality, so that would be, restaurants, hotels, clubs, anything food service and accommodation. It starts out with the majority being women. So I don't have the exact numbers, but it's over 50%.
Like starts out, you mean like at the
entry level positions are the majority women,
Right.
closer to 60%. But when it gets to the top level, the C-suite, it's something like 10%. So, and even below that, it's still only 20-something%.
So it's a huge shift that happens along the way.
So a lot of women are moving out of hospitality.
Can you talk to us a little bit about why that's the case specifically in that industry?
Yeah, one of the main things is the hours. And one of that is the children and the fact that women still take the majority of duties around childcare. So once they have kids, once they get older, they think, I have to make a move out. And we're speaking generally, like a lot of those entry-level positions are those more operational roles. So in restaurants or working, behind the counter at a coffee shop or whatever. So it's hard for them now to pick their child up at 6 o'clock from daycare. So they don't want to work Saturdays and Sundays. They want to go to their family outing. They want to go to birthday parties, and they can't. And it's women that want out, not men. Men don't call me wanting another job. Women do. So women just leave the industry.
Leave the industry, and I imagine also there's probably some type of scenario where maybe in those types of roles, those entry-level roles, they might not be the breadwinners as well. So when you're taking a look at, in a couple who's the one that's going to stay working, it would probably make more sense that it was the man if he was making more, and then it makes sense for them to leave.
Yeah, and that's right, and that's another problem. So is it the chicken or the egg, right? So men are still making more money, so women still have to leave. So how does that change if women continue to leave the workforce because men still continue to make more money? So again, which one comes first? And so it's hard to rectify that.
What do you think the impact of this is on society in general? Because, a lot of us might say, okay, great, one industry, it doesn't work well for women. There's probably other industries where there's more women in them, like in the real estate industry, for example.
Right.
There's a lot of women who are at the top of their game in the real estate industry. And I love that about the real estate industry. There's so many women who are single, married, single moms, and they're doing very, very well. Yeah. So, why can't we just throw our hands up and kind of say, oh, well, this is one industry that it just doesn't make sense for? What's the repercussions of that?
Because food service and accommodation is the largest industry in Canada. Or maybe it's the second, I don't want to say the largest, but it's in the top two anyway, of jobs, providing jobs. So if we have women leaving the industry, then we have our employment rate continues to decrease. So right now, we have 80,000 jobs just in food service and accommodation. So sure, it's okay if people leave, there's other industries they can go to, But if that is the biggest employer of people in Canada, or one of the biggest, and we're losing women out of there, then that's not great. And so
I didn't realize that about that industry.
And I think it's, there's a massive labor shortage right now. And so part of the problem, it's always been women leave, but now we have a labor shortage. So let's try and figure out how to keep women in. Right. That's still not happening.
Right. And it's kind of interesting. I suspect, like with women leaving, I mean, if the entry level, if the workforce is made up mostly of women, or is certainly more equal, maybe weighing more heavily on women in the entry level jobs, but then all of the managerial leadership positions are men, there's clearly going to be a bit of a disconnect between people leading people, not understanding the needs of women, not understanding the culture, how to build culture to keep people there. And you see that often, right? Like, you need to have women at the table. You need a diverse group of people at the table, not just women, of course, but people from all backgrounds. Because, I mean, I think the stats show that when you have women in leadership positions, when you have multicultural sitting at your table making decisions for an industry, that industry does better. Those companies tend to do better.
Yeah. The more the company reflects society, so diverse, whether that's gender or race or LGBTQ or disability, the more you represent society, the more successful you are and the more profit. There's actual studies that show the more diverse your workforce is, the more profits you're going to make.
So we need to make this
change. We need to make the change, yeah.
What are do you have any ideas or some tips or some tricks, or like what can we do to help move this needle forward?
And I think generally, and not just in hospitality, but one thing that I speak about a lot is we need men as our allies. We need to involve men, we need to ask men to help us, because the majority of decisions are still made by men. The workforce has been designed by men. So we as women need to include men, and they need to help us, they need to help pull us up. And it has to be an actual on purpose they're doing. It has to be thoughtful, there has to be programs in place. And one thing that I just recently spoke about as well is we have women, I'm sure you've gone to them Women's Day events or events about talking about how to get more women in the workplace. And the simple fact of just inviting a man to it will help bring more men. I go to conferences, women conferences, or women in the workforce conferences or things like that, and there's hardly any men in the audience, but you need them there to hear the conversations or they don't understand it.
Now, is it that we don't want to invite them there because we feel like it's our nice little bubble, or is it that men don't know if they should go, or they don't want to go?
No, I think a lot of it is men don't think they should go. It's an uncomfortable thing. Should I go? Do women just want to figure this out on their own? But so the idea is to actually invite them to the events instead of just sending out a blank email. Having a one-on-one conversation with someone, asking them to come, rebranding the event to Women and Allies, speaking one-on-one with men to tell your story. A lot of men feel that they are allies for women. They think they do a lot more for women than they actually do.
Okay.
So actually having that conversation, explaining times, like you mentioned earlier, when you're passed up for a promotion or when you weren't able to say your ideas in a meeting, them actually hearing it one-on-one can make a difference too.
Okay, because I feel sometimes, maybe this is just my perspective, but I don't want to be a complainer either, and you don't want to just go to the men and say, how hard it is and why we have it bad, because I don't feel like it's necessarily open for them to express their distaste with the way things are going on. And there's a bit of this culture, and I think it's changing a little bit, but this kind of suck it up, buttercup culture. Can you touch on that a little bit?
I think the culture is changing. I think Gen Zs, there's been, again, lots of studies that show that they are the most active generation for social justice. And so that's why, there's a recent law that was passed in Ontario that you have to have salary transparency. So that when you post a job, you have to say what it is. And that a lot of that is because of Gen Z. They want to make sure that women and men are being paid the same, or that different ethnicities are paid the same.
Yeah.
So they have made a difference. It's not, sure, there is a lot of that suck it up buttercup in other generations. Yes. And as far as...
And certain industries too.
And certain industries, for sure. I mean, again, hospitality just has a second, what was that? The second, what's the word? Less women, I don't know what it is. Second, the industry that has the second amount of women. Like the first is construction is the industry that has the least amount of women. Hospitality is the second.
Oh, really? Next to construction?
Yeah.
That is so crazy because I mean, I understand it in construction. I mean, it shouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
And I do now, there's a lot of construction sites around here. I see more women definitely on the sites and whatnot. But certain industries tend to attract more people. It's just that the hospitality industry attracts so many women right off the bat.
Right.
And so it's really crazy to think that along that career journey, some people, in other countries, like being a waiter is a full-time, that's your career choice, and you're paid well for that. I couldn't imagine that if someone, you spend 10 years in this industry, 15 years, you've worked there your whole life, just to then say, oh, I'm going to have a family now, so it doesn't make sense because I can't work these hours.
Yeah, and that's that whole thing about hospitality being an industry that's, until I find my real job, is a whole other conversation, because that's also an issue that a lot of us that have been in this industry for a while are trying to change why is it a job that only is a job for now?
Yeah,
and
why? Do you have any thoughts
because
around
when
this?
people think about restaurants, specifically restaurants or hotels, they're thinking about those entry-level roles. They're thinking about being a server or being, a housekeeper. But they're not thinking the fact that you can be a director of finance in a hotel. You can be a social media manager in a restaurant. You can do any jobs in hospitality that you can do in others. And I think it's just the perception. That starts from parents. Parents need to understand the career options, but that's not even related to women.
I think if we think of it as like, being the McDonald's, like, can I take your order person?
Right.
That's what we think of when we think hospitality. But even in McDonald's alone, like, you have managers, you have people that work their way up through the ranks that can get into corporate.
And they are great. And McDonald's is a perfect example. They pay very, very well. They're amazing. They pay better than a lot of once you get into the corporate level, right? There's a lot of that stuff.
And I bet the benefits are good and all that
the
stuff.
Training, they're very low turnover. But that's a whole other thing. Hospitality generally has an issue with that.
Talk to me a little bit about your background, because what would make someone think, like, I'm going to help recruit and it's going to be for this specific niche?
Right. So I started working in restaurants, like I think a lot of people do, bartending and serving, and all through high school and university. Then I went to Australia to work for a few years, again, got a job as a server, because, it's your backpacking, you're making money. And then someone asked if you want to be a manager. I did business and HR at university, but I loved restaurants. I thought, I'll take a shot at managing. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people. You love it, and so you end up working in it.
Yeah.
So I got to then mix my business background, because you're still running a business, and my love for restaurants. I moved back to Canada. I got a job at Canoe, which is one of Canada's best restaurants.
Yes.
I was
I've
a
never
manager.
been, by
You
the
haven't
way.
been?
I have never been to Canoe. Can you even believe it?
Well, you should go,
I
because
need
there's
to
even
go.
a bar you can go for. There's a
I
bar you
don't
just have a
know.
drink, look at the lake.
I don't know why I haven't. It's like on my list,
Yeah.
but I think because my husband goes for a lot of work. It's like a work
Well, yeah,
function place,
yeah, that's
and so
right.
he's like, "Well, I don't want to go there on the weekend because, like, I've been
And it's not
there.
even closed on the week. It's Monday to Friday.
Yeah,
anyway.
right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So I go out on the
That's right.
weekends. Okay, my husband goes out during the week, so
Yeah.
I don't get to do any of these fun places.
Yeah.
But okay,
Well, you can go for a drink after work someday and just see the view, because it's beautiful.
I know. I heard. Okay,
Yeah.
so Canoe.
So I worked at
you
Canoe,
were
and then
there.
I got into wine. I started to get really into wine. So then I went and got my sommelier stuff, and I did all sorts of wine education.
Can I stop
yeah.
you there on the sommelier thing?
Yeah.
I've had a sommelier on this show.
I know, I saw.
And I don't know what it is. I attract the sommeliers. I think it's because I like wine. Other people like wine. So
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I want to be a sommelier. This sounds like
Do
the
you?
coolest, well, maybe not, but you're like,
I mean,
you?
yeah, there's
Maybe.
a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's like a lot of nights and weekends too. Like a sommelier is someone that's on the floor working
Right.
they're like a manager as well.
Right.
They're doing the wine stuff.
And what made you go pursue that path? Well, at that time, I guess you
I think.
weren't married, no kids.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I was just like, I love the industry. You're around these amazing wines all the time. I feel like someone, and again, this is that whole mentor thing, someone said to me, I think you've got a good nose, you should probably do it. And so I took one course, and you just kind of get the bug. And that's also my personality. I just always want to learn new stuff and change it up.
Yeah.
So I did that.
And that was your full-time gig for a bit?
Yeah. Yes, at Canoe. So for 5 years,
Okay.
I was a manager and sommelier at Canoe.
Okay.
So I did, all the management stuff that you would do, as plus the wine stuff. And then, similar to the conversation I just had about women, I was like, I want to think about what else I can do next. I don't want to be able to work nights and weekends all the time. So I decided that, HR. And so I started pitching to the owners at that time. For about a year, I pitched to them why they need an HR department. Now it's a massive company now.
They didn't have an
Well, there was 3 restaurants at that time.
Okay.
Now I think, I don't know, they have 50 restaurants or more.
Okay.
They had 3 restaurants. So I was one of the first people in that company.
Oh, wow.
So I pitched to the owners, this is why I need an HR department for about a year. And then after a year, they're both like, okay, just come do it. So then I started the HR department.
Can I ask you a question about this pitch? Was it men you were pitching to?
It was men I was pitching to.
Okay.
So the owners are 2 men, and I don't know what his title was at the time, but because there was only 3 restaurants, he ended up being VP operations, but at that time I think he was a senior level manager. He was on my side, and that's another thing I tell women too, right? So he was on my side and spoke up for me and sort of worked with me to pitch. To be able to pitch that.
You need, like you said, you need an advocate, someone
right.
who's there to help you. And I think sometimes we have this preconceived notion that like men aren't our advocates or we're working against each other.
Yeah.
And just by educating or just by having the conversation and like setting our ego aside, because they might you might get turned down.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily because you're a woman.
No.
So you also have to kind of like put that to the side for a second. Maybe it's just not a very good idea, or you didn't do your research,
right.
or your pitch wasn't great.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not a natural salesperson. So you got to think that there's all these other things that come into play too. So even by having another person, maybe a man, or maybe just someone from a different walk of life to give ideas, or who has different skill sets that can kind of help you with something like that. Because that's a pretty big thing to just walk in and say, I think we need an HR.
Yeah, and I think you need to have those people at the table, and they're usually men, like I said before, because the system's been set up for men by men, at the table to be able to say, oh yeah, Val, she should do, we should think about HR. Val wants to do it, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So you need those people to sort of.
Oh my gosh, they were probably happy to. Sure, you take it on.
Yeah.
And one less thing I have to worry about. Okay, and so how was that setting that system up?
It was, I started part-time. I started doing, I think, 3 days a week in HR, 2 days still at Canoe, and then eventually after 6 months or something, I went into a full-time. And then I grew them from 3 restaurants to about 20 restaurants in HR to a larger team. But that's another thing I tell women as well. If you want to find a job, you love restaurants or you love hospitality, and you want to get out of that nights and weekends, then you need to speak up for yourself. You need to figure out what you want to do, come up with a proposal, come up with the ideas, and say what you want to do. Because sometimes you have to create your own stuff.
Do you think that's hard for a lot of people?
I think that is hard for a lot of people.
Why do you think that is? Is it just lack of confidence?
Probably.
Harder for women?
It's harder for women for sure, because we're socialized differently. If women speak up, there's lots of things that say will be seen as aggressive. In fact, I just read something today that self-help books, books about how to better yourself are in the self-help section for women, and they're in the leadership section for men at a bookstore. So there's a perfect example of that. Books on how to better yourself, self-help section, if they're talking about better yourself as a woman.
Not leadership.
Leadership section if you're talking about better yourself as a man.
Interesting.
So there's that thing there. So I feel like that's part of the thing for women. It's harder to.
Chapters
socialized.
or Indigo. Switch that. That's bad.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I actually just read that this morning.
Wow.
But yeah, I think that's what it is. I think, people don't want to speak up. People are afraid to speak up, and not just women. And sometimes people just don't even think about it. Sometimes I, suggest that idea to someone, and they say, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea."
Right.
So
they don't even know. Like they think that they can't create their own future, right?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Okay, so at what point did you make the shift? Because you don't work for Canoe now.
No.
What time? When did you make the shift out?
So I was at Canoe for 5 years, and then I was HR director for 9 years. So over 14 years in this restaurant company. And then someone that I used to work with had a recruitment company and said, hey, do you want to come recruit? And I started, and my identity was obviously very tied to this Oliver and Bonacini, this company. I'd been there so long. So it was a tough decision, but I guess the bottom line was, is this where I want to retire? Do I want to try something new? And so I did that. So I was with a business partner for about 9 years, and then for the last 3 years, I've gone out my own. So I do recruiting, but just in hospitality. I'm able to still I'm still able to be around restaurant people, which is nice.
What's the kind of common themes? Like, I know obviously you said, people tend to leave when they show up, and like you have your meetings and they're saying like, I think I need a new job. What are they looking for? What is it? What are some of the trends or the themes that you see?
when companies come to me, say I need a general manager for this restaurant or that sort of thing.
Okay.
Because
So
I would deal with the
with
clients. Yes, the companies.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the companies are my client.
Okay.
And then I go out and help them. So a hotel will come to me and say,
Gotcha.
I need an HR manager, and then I go out and find them candidates and present. And then
Okay.
yeah.
Well, obviously, then there's probably some type of mismatch, right? Like companies want something, and you're like, there is or there isn't what you're looking for. What's generally that gap that you have to kind of fill and or educate those companies on your clients on?
I think it depends on what it is. I tend to get a lot of operational roles, so food and beverage related roles, so restaurant roles, and so that is more of a thing to educate on. If it's someone's just looking for finance or HR or purchasing, then that's fairly standard. They kind of get it. But I feel like when it's with operations roles, some of the things that I need to educate them on are people coming from different styles of restaurants. It might be someone fine dining doesn't want to look at someone from a casual restaurant. It may be someone that doesn't have, great wine knowledge, but could learn it. And because there's a labor shortage, so even more so the last 5 years, they have to think more broadly about, so that's the things I would say is, okay, I get you want someone that has 10 years experience managing a super high-end restaurant, but what about if I find you someone that has the ability to learn the nitty-gritty but has the personality and the sales thing. So I think a lot of that is just conversation, opening people's eyes up to why it's not always so black and white about who you're going to hire.
Okay, and then the pivoting on the other side, the people who are trying to find new jobs, new roles, what do you try to tell them to prepare themselves for? Because do you put people in entry-level positions or mostly just executive leadership?
Well, manager and leadership, manager and executive. So it doesn't necessarily be a senior manager. It could be like a general manager of a restaurant or a sommelier in a restaurant.
What's the kind of, what are you like, okay, if you're going to go down this path, this is what you need to have your ducks in a row before we go down here, or here's what you need to know before getting into this so that it's the right industry.
So usually everyone that I would work with would already be in this industry.
Okay.
It's people a lot of people maybe trying to get out of the industry for the same reasons we spoke about before. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that a lot of people want these 9-to-5 jobs in restaurants. They love restaurants like I did, but they want to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And those jobs, I can tell you, are few and far between, obviously, because restaurants are busy at nights and weekends. Yeah. So what I always tell people is, okay, fair, but what makes you different than everybody else that wants to work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for a restaurant? So you have to always be learning. And I give my example of, I was a manager in a restaurant, and so I went and did my sommelier thing. I wanted to get out of restaurants day to day, so I started that's when I did HR at university, but didn't get my designation, so I started getting my designation. You have to prepare long in advance if you want to make a move into something else.
It's kind of interesting, as you were talking, made me think of the quote that's dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
Right, yeah. Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, but there's also this kind of idea of do the job before you have the job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You obviously did that. You're doing the work, and I've done that. That's actually helped me very much in my career, which is when I was an intern, I didn't just do intern work. It was, how can I find things that I can take off other people's desks so that they don't have to do it? You become invaluable that way, right? And a lot of people say, well, I'm not being paid for that. I'm not being compensated, but you will.
Yeah.
Because people will see that. You have to have faith that someone will notice all the hard work that you're putting in, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'll suggest that on the other side too, for both sides. Okay, you want to get into marketing or you want to do social media. Have you spoken to your manager at your restaurant to say, hey, can I do the Instagram one day a week? Can I give you ideas for that? And on the other side, if the companies want to increase the retention of their staff, they have to know what all their staff want to do and give them those stretch projects so that everyone's helping each other. So that helps the person get more skills that they can put on their resume, and it helps the company because they're using people with their capabilities and increasing their retention because they're going to stick around longer. But not enough people do that.
I imagine the interview process for these is pretty lengthy. It's not just one interview, or maybe you meet with a couple people. Do you have some tips and tricks for when you actually send people out to go interview with these companies, what they should do?
Yeah, I do. And that's something I have all sorts of tips. Even on my Instagram, there's a ton of tips about what to do. I go through full interview prep with the candidate before that. There's so many, I can give you
But like,
from
yeah,
start
even
to
just,
finish.
is it like, you know, how you shake someone's hand is like,
Yeah.
maybe that's something small and everyone knows that. But I
No.
haven't been in the workforce for, or like, I haven't been interviewing
Yeah.
for a long, long, long time.
Yeah.
So I feel very out of touch with what's happening.
So first of all, even from the resume, hiring managers look at your resume for 6 to 7 seconds. So it has to be short, it has to be concise. You don't put objectives, you don't put hobbies, you don't put photos, you don't put your address. It's short and concise so that people actually can look at it.
Oh, okay.
There's so many little
So not
things
the
like that.
3-page resume.
No, the max should be 2 pages, and I mean that's for a senior level person.
Okay.
Max is 2 pages.
So entry level probably.
No, I mean 1 page is plenty for a lot of
Okay.
a lot of things.
Okay, so that's the resume.
That's the resume.
Yeah.
Then when you get an interview, send a message to the day before. Now you're meeting with whoever the person you're meeting with. The day before on LinkedIn, send them a message saying, "Hi, looking forward to meeting you tomorrow. See you then," or something. So you're standing out, but you're also taking away a bit of that sort of pre-interview jitters because you've sort of met them before you showed up. So you've seen their face, you've had that connection.
Right. That's kind of some, do your homework a little bit.
Yeah, do your homework. That's another thing. Do your homework. Find out who's interviewing you, where they worked before. Do the research about the company, who their competitors are. You need to. An interview is a job. You have to research and know because you want to stand out in that process. Figure out what people wear. If it's like a chill vibe, casual environment, you can't show up in 3-piece suit, and vice versa. Like practice is a big thing. I always tell people, and I'll give like practice questions. It's all practice. You practice in front of a mirror. You write down your accomplishments, and you practice how you're going to speak about them in front of a mirror.
Are there certain questions that generally get asked in these things?
Yeah. I think that, generally overall, but you can it's easy now because there's Google.
Yeah.
I
know. Back in the
There's
day,
Google.
we had to
that's
go
right.
blind to these things.
Yeah,
We had no
and people,
idea.
there's like standard questions, and that's why before the interview, you write down all your accomplishments and you attach metrics to them so you can speak about specific things.
Attach metrics to them.
Yeah.
That's smart, right?
You can't just say,
That's
"Oh
top
yeah, I'm
numbers.
really good at, because we're talking about marketing, Instagram, I'm really good at that." Okay,
What
but if
have
you
you
say,
done?
"I got this many followers from this post, and it took like specific examples and write them down."
And
so
I
that
grew X amount of right, and
Or
the impact on the business.
Yeah, or I decrease, for example, a chef always wants to decrease food costs, so don't just say, "Yeah, I decreased food costs at this restaurant." By how many percentage did you got it from this percent to this percent, and how you did it. So like writing it down before and practicing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember way back in the day, I reached out to Holt Renfrew with I was doing my buying certificate, but I had no experience working in retail. And I wanted to work in their buying department. And I reached out. I don't know if this would be the same way today, but I called, I emailed, until finally, I think the HR was just like, "Okay, fine, just come in for your freaking appointment because we can't take you following up." Like, I always say, you follow up until someone tells you to F off or until they accept it, right?
Yeah.
And I got the interview. Again, no background. It's really ironic, though. I know you might not put your hobbies necessarily on your resume, but I actually happen to have worked in ski racing.
Yeah.
So I had that as experience back in the day. I was 20 years old or whatever, trying to get this job. And the reason I got the job was not for anything else except that me and the person who was interviewing me, we both grew up skiing and ski racing. And so you said do a little bit of research, find them on LinkedIn. What are their interests? Who do they like? What schools did they go to?
Exactly.
You find any connection,
That's right.
and sometimes it's the most random connection, but that's all it takes just to get your foot in the door.
Exactly. And even to what you said about keep trying as many avenues, that's another thing I will tell people. Not if you're working with me as a recruiter because I would do this stuff for you, but if you're applying for a job on your own and when you're waiting for an interview, even after, when you have the interview, again, LinkedIn is your friend. Reach out to as many people on LinkedIn that work there and send messages to them. You want as many people to know your name as you can because now they're all sitting around a room. "Oh yeah, that person called. Oh yeah, that person called me too." You want name recognition, similar to what you're saying. But also figuring out the person that's interviewing you because you want to make a connection.
Okay, I know you've been doing some incredible work. You were in Ghana recently.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that? What are you doing there? I've never been.
Yeah. Have you been anywhere in Africa?
No.
Yeah.
It's on my ultimate bucket list.
Yeah.
But
so it's through a not-for-profit called Catalyst Plus, and it's through Foreign Affairs Canada. So basically it used to be called CESO, so Canadian Executive Services. So basically it's executives that are paired with a business in a developing country. So you go through a whole bunch of, anyway, I got accepted to do this. And so then assignments come up. And so the assignment I did in Ghana.
Why did you want to do it? You said I got accepted to do it, but what you were drawn to this?
Yeah, again, I think that's the same thing with talking about me doing my sommelier thing or my HR thing. I think I'm just like a constant learner, and I want to always be doing something new. And because I am very much like a social activist and understand my privilege by just being born in Canada, I feel like it's also my responsibility to be able to help other like people and countries and things.
Yeah.
Wow. So that was always kind of what I was like.
That's very admirable.
Yeah, well, but I mean, it's also great for me too, because I got to experience. So they set everything up.
Yeah.
So I just helped. It can be anything. There's any industry, and so my specific thing is obviously HR. But you could, if you're a finance person or a sponsorship or marketing, there's lots of opportunities for everybody. But I just helped in this particular case, an orphanage, hospital, schools set up their performance management system.
What were you most surprised by, maybe? Positively or negatively, or maybe both?
I mean, it is a big culture shock. I've been very lucky. I've traveled a lot. I mean, starting when I was in my 20s, I backpacked around Europe for a year. I've been all over Asia, and I've traveled a lot, but This was my first time to Africa.
Yeah.
And I've been to lots of like developing countries before in South and Central America, Asia, but this is like a completely different level of poverty that you can imagine. But it's also a very beautiful culture, and they're very happy with what they have. There's no, it's different than here. There's no feeling of, oh, I don't have this. These kids will just play with a stick in the park. They don't. And then here we are getting our kids all this stuff and signing them up for all these things. I think that was something that I really was, these kids were still laughing and playing and having
just as
a great time.
Happy, if not happier.
Just as happy.
Than kids here. What do you think that is? Is it because like you think there's no comparison? Is it just the culture here is like everyone for themselves trying to like climb?
I think it's just a completely different, and we can't put our culture on them, and it's not that we're right or they're right, it's just so different.
Right.
Starting from everything, even things like recycling. Of course they're not going to recycle there, but we would probably judge that thinking, oh, well, they don't recycle.
Right.
But you drink 10 bottles of water a day because you can't drink the water, so you throw everything, but then you think, but how can they recycle when there's not even food for,
Yeah.
So we
have to start with different
things like
priorities,
that.
right?
That's right,
like,
yeah.
Oh my goodness. That's amazing. What was it like, the actual work that you were doing? Mm-hmm. Were they surprised by it? Was it hard to explain it, or was it received well?
It was received well.
Yeah.
It's a different work culture where it's very much, if you are the boss, what you say goes.
Yeah.
And so the whole performance review thing is talking about, giving people feedback continually and how to do that. And at the end you give them review, and that we tied that to compensation. But I think there was a lot of changing people's mindsets that, basic things like, it's okay to speak, it's okay to tell your boss that, you don't think that this is fair in these meetings. That's a cultural thing, so that's a hard switch. So we made it.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So we just made it very basic so that it was an easier thing to talk about.
Wow.
But little things, even like, at the end, I developed this whole thing. At the end, I trained maybe 60 senior level, like C-suite managing directors, and we gave them 2 days notice to have that afternoon off for 4 hours of training. But that's the way it is. Right. I was like, in Canada, we'd have to tell someone 2 months in advance.
Right.
But here, that wasn't the thing. It's just a different.
Well, and then at least changes like that maybe can be made a little bit faster, right? Here, it's meetings about meetings
That's right.
about meetings, and it's very, very slow in the corporate world.
Yeah.
You went out at it on your own. You started a business, you said 3 years ago?
Yes.
3 years ago?
Yeah.
You and I were talking off camera about just the hustle and what it's like owning your own business, being a self-starter. Talk to me about your experience in owning your own company. How's that been?
It's been great. I think but that is it is a certain type of person. I feel that in these sorts of sales, because recruiting basically is sales, real estate it's sales. I mean, it has to be someone that just can deal with rejection, can, when they get knocked down, can get up again, can just keep going, grind it out. I think that's a specific thing that not everyone gets. And also wearing, the thing that I think was the hardest for me was wearing all these hats until I was able to bring people on. You know, now I'm the finance person doing my bookkeeping and figure out the taxes, and it's a corporation, and doing the HR stuff and the payroll and billing people, but then also doing my actual job around finding people jobs and finding companies people. So
you're
that's
everything.
A thing.
Well, it's kind of like being a mother, I guess, in a way. I'm not a mother,
right.
but I imagine it's like being a mother, because when I worked in the corporate world, you know, you see other people and they're I'm a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur, and it has this kind of like, I don't know, je ne sais quoi about it that you think looks really attractive on the outside, when really on the inside, once you get in there, you know, you get under the hood, it's messy. Like entrepreneurship's messy, and you have to do everything. You have to know how to do it all until you're even at the place of hiring, and then you also have to be good at hiring, and you have to be good at managing people. Oftentimes we have skill sets that we're good at, like even just saying someone being a great waiter, for example. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll be a good manager per se, but a lot of times they think, well, I'm the best waiter on the floor. I sell the most, I get the biggest tips. But that doesn't mean you know how to manage it.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
So it's all those it's the same thing. There's all those variables in owning your own business, and the whole like eat what you kill kind of thing too is a hard thing to wrap your head around. You know, if you don't work, you don't make money. Sure, you can sit around all day and do nothing, but then how are you going to pay your bills? So that's, and also to be able to be in that position, to be able to do that is also a privilege thing too.
Well, from the outside looking in, I just said don't do that. But here I am on the outside looking in. I mean, obviously you've had quite a career and you're very independent. You're a self-starter. You've created all of these different opportunities for yourself. What would be, you know, if I'm a 20-year-old watching this, and maybe I work in hospitality, I'm a waiter or not, just for women who are watching you, who might be looking up to you in your career journey. Do you have any kind of lasting advice that you would give that young person, maybe the younger you when you were 20?
I think it's just the stuff we spoke about, that you have to be your own, and sometimes that can suck, right? It can suck that you have to be your own advocate. You have to be your own, you have to take stuff on yourself, and to your point, not everyone's like that. And so then if you're not like that, you have to bring people perhaps with you that are like that. But I think that's the thing, is always be looking ahead, always be taking the next step forward. If someone's looking at your resume and you've gone back in something, that's not good. You need to keep going for it, but you need to make a plan. That's what I think it is. Plan, it doesn't have to be any big plan, just little steps to take you to where you want to go. So know what your end goal is, or kind of, because if you're 20, you don't need to know your end goal, but kind of at this point.
And the end goal changes.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, what's your end goal? You're 20, maybe that's going to change when you're 30, but you're 20, where do you want to get to? Look at people that are in that role now and what they did to get there, and see what kind of steps you can get that are similar to that to get you to that same spot. But you have to pre-plan stuff. You can't just say one day, oh, I want to do this. You have to make sure you take the steps to do it, and speak up for yourself. You know, you have to, if you want to do something, it may be hard to do, to ask for, and I get it's hard for a lot of people, but that's your best bet, is to speak up and ask for it.
Yeah, and you know what? You'll probably regret it if you didn't, more than if you did, right? And
that's right.
Maybe you somehow get challenged after, and then all of a sudden you get the worst work shifts because you spoke up, you did something, but at least you took your life in control of your own hands, and you said, I'm going to move this forward, and you always have the choice to leave. I know leaving jobs is not always easy as well, but they can come to people like you.
That's right, exactly. There's lots of jobs in hospitality.
There's lots of jobs, and there's lots of jobs in lots of things.
Yes,
and so maybe sometimes when one door closes, another one opens. And so that's fantastic advice. I'm trying to think, my 20-year-old self. I definitely would tell my 20-year-old self to just relax a little bit.
Yeah.
like it's really not gonna end up anything in life, whether it be relationships, parenthood, that journey, whatever that looks like, your career. Most things don't turn out as you expected.
That's right. Yeah.
But having a strong, yes, this is my why, this would be the ideal situation, but just know you're gonna take so many different avenues, paths to get there.
And especially jobs. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but people used to be in one job for life. Now it's like Gen Zs or something, I don't know, over 10, 15 jobs. There's no thing about staying in one job.
There's no loyalty.
People don't want to see that. I mean, that's also another thing. If someone's been around somewhere for 10 years now, people are like,
that's
why
weird.
has that person been there so long, right?
Yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
it's funny. I think what used to scare us when we were younger was like, oh, then your resume looks very choppy.
Yeah.
But I think as people get more into managerial, that doesn't scare a lot of people. In fact, they see that as a benefit because it's like, well, you have a lot of different experience that you can draw on.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I love that. Yeah. Where can people find you if someone's, looking to make some change or they want some tips on interviewing and stuff? What's the best place for them to locate you?
Probably the best one is Instagram, just because it has a bunch of stuff on there. So there's a bunch of tips on how to interview, and also a bunch of tips for employers, how to increase retention, how to interview better. There's lots of stuff there. So that's probably, and I post all the jobs there. So that's just my name, Val Upfold, on Instagram. Is probably the best.
Wonderful. Yeah. One of your most recent posts was actually you on the social.
Yeah.
You just did that.
I did.
How was that? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those things that's kind of like nerve-wracking.
Was that your first time doing like a TV experience?
Yeah, like that, like national TV. Yeah, that was, so it was.
So if she looks familiar, that's because you saw her on the social.
But
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was fun.
Nervous though?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I did a screen test before.
Yeah.
And that actually felt a bit more nerve-wracking, I guess, because then you don't know, are they going to say I can do it or not? But then the actual day was also, because then you start thinking,
Like,
what if I forget what I'm talking about? Or
yes, and I'm sure you crushed it. I'm sure it was fantastic. But the one kind of common thread that I've got from our conversation today is you just have this kind of like, yeah, I'm scared. Yeah, I don't know. But I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just do it. And I'm going to figure it out along the way. And so I really appreciate that quality inside.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being here. And guys, we will see you next time.